All right.
Okay. Hello and welcome to today's virtual roundtable expert discussion called Social Selling in 2016. Super excited to have with me today Natascha Thomson, Jasmine Sandler, and Julio Viskovich. We actually do have a hashtag for this session. It's a hashtag social selling 16. And I'll also show it on a follow-up slide. But hey guys, why don't we go ahead and introduce ourselves real quick? Why don't we start with the farthest away, Natascha? Where are you? Natascha, can you hear me?
Hi, Natasha. Yes, I can.
All right.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi everybody. We're so excited to be here today and thanks for listening. I know there's lots of other things you could be getting information from, so we will try really hard to be interesting. I am the CEO of Marketing Accelerator, which is a boutique social media marketing firm. And I try to help anybody from large companies to individuals with their social media strategy. And I'm also very passionate about training. I teach some social media courses at the University of Santa Cruz Extension, and I also love yoga.
All right. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Jasmine.
Yes, hi everybody. First off, Chris, thank you so much for putting this together. I feel like we are the international powerhouse of social selling, so I actually think it's going to be really interesting and exciting, this conversation. So my name is Jasmine Sandler. I've been in digital marketing, I feel like, for too long, actually since 1994. I've been involved with social media, SEO, and digital marketing in a number of ways. Started off by starting and selling a social network back in 2004, and since then I've consulted for a number of agencies. I am the CEO of Agency Online Marketing, which is a B2B social media marketing and SEO agency based in Manhattan. And like Natascha, I love to train, I love to travel, and I'm a hockey player. So that's on the side.
Ooh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Julio, that's a good take it over from here. Hockey, where are you located?
Yeah, it's a good segue for us Canadians up here. I'm in
Yes.
Vancouver, British Columbia, and I love to hear that, Jasmine. That's amazing. Chris, thanks for having us. It's great to be here with such a great panel and to share our ideas and for such an innovative and relevant topic right now, which is social selling. Like I said, I'm here in Vancouver, so aside from being in the tech space for the last 10 years, I'm now a vice president of marketing at R Factor. We're a social selling technology, and also also the professor of digital marketing at the University of British Columbia in my spare time, which I don't have much of. So when I do, I'm very happy to spend it with you all on the line today.
Awesome. My name is Chris Raulf. I'm the founder of Boulder SEO Marketing. We do local, national, international search engine optimization. One of my passion and hobbies is social media marketing. And actually, here's why we're all talking. I got invited to this conference in Vegas called ConnectCon, and I looked at who's speaking, and I saw that Natascha and Jasmine were speaking there. So I connected with them online first, I think Twitter, then LinkedIn, and then we took it like down to the level of like real social interactions. We had coffee, we spoke, and we said, hey, let's do something together. So this is what I call social selling yourself. All right, let's move on here. So the good news is that I think you guys will learn quite a bit. We have tremendous knowledge here. I'm super excited to have these experts with me here, pick their brains. The bad news is that we simply cannot cover everything, and we're probably not going to get to all the questions. But I definitely would like to encourage you to tweet me questions at SwissChris or use the hashtag social selling 16. And you're also welcome to tweet directly to, and of course, follow Julio, Natascha, and Jasmine. Okay. So what we're going to cover and what I hope you'll learn today is, what social selling is really all about. I don't think a lot of people do it well. So hopefully we can help you there. Why tools can't replace the human touch. What is the difference between social selling and social branding / marketing, and how to effectively execute and measure social selling. Hopefully you'll learn how to connect with the right people, prospects online after the session, how to use social selling to shorten the sales cycle. Wouldn't that be awesome, right? And how to retain customers for a longer period of time, how to keep them happy, potentially use social as a customer service support tool, and then how we're going to meet and exceed sales quotas. Pretty bold statements here. Okay, let's dive into this presentation or conversation. Social selling demystified. Julio, what is social selling not? Let's get this out of the way. What is social selling not?
Well, it's not a lot. It's definitely a lot of not things there, Chris, for sure. When I think of what social selling is, it's being human, right? It's really layering social channels in such a way over your sales process that's both strategic but human. Social selling is not automated. Social selling is not hard selling. Social media is meant to complement the sales process. It's not meant to close deals on social or immediately ask somebody for something when you initially connect with them. And those are just a few of the things that it definitely is not.
Awesome. Natascha, you want to say a word about that?
Well, I would say it's important to point out that social selling is not social marketing. And I think there's a lot of confusion about that because social selling is, I would argue, even newer than social marketing, that a lot of the time organizations haven't actually had that reorg and that discussion of responsibilities of who is doing what, and the salespeople sometimes also do their marketing, and then it ends up being spam. Instead, I think what has to happen is that it's clear marketing and sales who's responsible for what, and I know we'll talk about this more, but I think there's no doubt that the buyer cycle is crucial here at knowing where in the cycle people are and then taking the right actions to progress them to the right stage.
Great. To me, it's like, I live on LinkedIn. I connect with many people every day, and I can tell that I will get an email right away or a message from somebody that wants to sell me something. So I connect with them anyhow just to see what the message is. And it's such a turn off, and I will disconnect with them right away. So to me, that's what you're not supposed to do. Jasmine, what is social selling not?
I'm going to try to keep it brief because, man, I have a lot to say. But I want to kind of tip in on what all of you said. So first, Chris, as a LinkedIn author and trainer many times over, I completely agree with you that LinkedIn is not the place where people, like when I first started doing LinkedIn training, people would come to me and say, can I connect? And then I would connect with them because maybe we had something in common. And then they would say, okay, give me your list. Who are all your followers? Can you set up meetings? I'm like, I don't work for you. That's first of all. Yeah. So it is definitely not hard selling. It is also not traditional solution sales, which I learned when I was at IBM. It is, and I agree with Natascha, it's something fairly new. So it is not solution selling. It's not hard selling. It's also not just branding, because branding, you can brand all day and drive impressions, but you need to identify that point. I call it like the adjunct cornerstone where social marketing and social selling come together. And so these are all the things that it is absolutely not. It is, I know we're going to get into this, but it's really about being of value in a social ecosystem. So that is something that requires, like Natascha was saying, really collaboration and communication between marketing and sales. And it's certainly a new thing.
Absolutely. All right. So why don't we talk about, so what exactly is social selling? If you guys would have to describe it in, to your mom, or that? How would you, Jasmine, I'm going to start with you. How would you describe it? Short.
Well, my mom, she wouldn't get it. But for the rest of the world, social selling, because my focus is B2B. I truly love B2B marketing and B2B sales. So social selling is really about relationship building. But I think for me, it's a process, and it's a process where someone first identifies proper influencers and target audience across a buying cycle, and then at that point, it's about identifying what content of value, what incentives of value we can seed across this cycle, across these people, to build and nurture relationships in such a way that's human. So that's how I would describe it.
Awesome. Natascha, before I'm going to ask you, let me just quickly share you how, us connecting via social media and then in person has worked for me. So basically, we ended up doing another panel together in which you connected me with another panelist who is organizing or co-organizing the largest tech conference in Europe. And we connected, and I'm now doing the head talk about SEO at this conference, and I know I'll get business out of that. Connect with tons of people. So to me, this is social selling yourself. It's a process, but it works. Natascha, what is it for you?
Okay, I'll go back to what it's not for a second. Because that's what many people think social selling is. If you think about a sales team and they say, oh, we should also be on social media and we want the company to give us content that we can push out there, and that's social selling. And I think that's terrible, because at the foundation of social selling, just like the foundation of marketing in any department that's on social media, is being proficient in the use of the tools. So learning how social media really works from the T and getting some practice, and then being able to create your own content. Or, if you need content ideas and your company has a corporate account, you can pick the content up there, for example. But to get a little more concrete here, so for me, it's always about differentiating the other things that can be done with social. For example, there's customer service, there's marketing, there's sales. And in this age, I think everybody's selling in a way, because if you have one-on-one contact with the customer, you're in this chain, right? There's no more hiding in the ivory tower. But social selling for me means that, and Jasmine touched on this really well, you build trusted relationships, you have to build your own brand, you have to become a thought leader, a trusted person in your area, and then communicate with those people who are, as a salesperson, your potential deals that you close in the right way to drive them through the cycle. And I think deals can be closed on social media. I mean, sometimes it's make the phone call, but overall, it's maybe a little bit more relationship building before people end up talking and doing a little more detailed work. I also want to point out, obviously, it really depends if it's B2B or B2C, because B2B is so complex, such a long sales cycle, such high dollar amounts, that you will, in my opinion, never close that online. And as Jasmine said, I could talk about this forever too, and that's why I will rest now.
All right. And I think, Julia, you actually work for a social selling tool, so to speak. So later on in this discussion, you'll probably be able to share how your tool has directly created sales for your clients, right? But so what exactly is social selling? Short and sweet.
Yeah, well, I think Natascha hit it on the head, and it's kind of funny. I have a saying that I picked up from Chris Brogan many years ago. B2C social selling is make the mom or wife happy. B2B social selling is make 10 decision makers happy and want to buy from you. So what is it to me? It's just a new way of selling. And anytime anybody asks that question, they generally either are looking at a computer screen or have a mobile phone in their hand. So I kind of flip it back and say, Well, first of all, what are you holding in your hand? And that's exactly why we need social. Buyers today are modern, they're digitally connected, they're on their mobile phones, they're on social media. And no longer are the days where phone and email can just be, the two pillars you're going to use as a communication channel. It's a tripod now, and if you're missing social media out of that process, you're not going to be able to stand up and compete in today's sales world. It's a place where phone and email are communications that are far apart, and there's a huge dark period within communications. And social allows you to take advantage of that dark period, eliminate it, build relationships, and share content that's going to challenge the buyer from their status quo, or share content that's going to build value and provide insights. And if you use social like that, you'll see sales cycles accelerate, and you'll see relationships accelerate.
Awesome. Natascha, what results can you realistically achieve with social selling?
Well, this is always the question with social media, and I just read this depressing statistic from a Gartner report that only 15% of CMOs, and I know that's marketing, but social sales, I think people measure even less, that only 15% actually know if their social media efforts are showing results. And I think that is the sad truth. And this is why I'm excited Julio's on the call, because they are trying to change that, right? But most people are kind of stepping in the dark, and they do stuff because they think they also have to be on social media when really they have no idea. And it's not about total numbers. For me, it's in the end all about conversions, because that's what you can measure. Unless you are super sophisticated and you have extremely great tools, and you're in the nirvana of digital transformation, you might have a hard time to track through from Twitter to your pipeline, although it's possible. But the majority of people, even if you don't have fancy tools, I think what everybody can do is to say, okay, I created this many impressions, because that's easy to measure on any channel nowadays. And then, okay, if I have 1 million impressions, how many people actually engaged, liked, shared, clicked on something? And then of the people who clicked, how many maybe visited my website? And that's already more sophisticated. But thinking about, how much am I putting in, and then understanding, for example, how many impressions do I have to generate to create conversion towards my goals? Say it's website visits, and then in the end, that will help you to determine, how much maybe you have to spend in advertising or other sales efforts that your company finds appropriate. So I think in the basic level, it's social media metrics and being really, really clear on, what you want to measure and what success looks like. But the more money and resources you have, the more sophisticated you can be. But in the end, right, if you're doing a lot of stuff and your sales aren't meeting objectives or going down, then something's going wrong. It's kind of like branding and PR. You cannot always have a direct correlation, but if nothing moves up on the right, then you definitely know it's not working.
Yeah. Well, let me just add. So I do mostly SEO, but we do a lot of social. It's a big part of the SEO landscape. We can, we set up Google Analytics goals, and we can measure how many people got to the website through LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, and how many of those actually converted into a sale. And we have a client, I think they're on it's a $2,000 budget. I think they're getting about $4,000 or $5,000 in sales directly to social traffic. And then usually organic SEO, it's a lot more. But you know what? You can measure this, and you should measure this. But we'll talk more about measuring down the road. I have a question for Julio. So social is all about content. I mean, there's no social without content, right? So where do you get your content? What's a good mix of curation, creation, or paying for content?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it depends on a lot of things. I think it depends on where you're at from a budgetary resource buy-in perspective. Natascha hit it right on the head when she mentioned, you're going to have to figure out how much you can put into this, how much you want to get back, how sophisticated are you. If you're somebody who's not getting much internal buy-in or support, and social selling isn't a part of the overall scheme of the sales process for you, and it hasn't been bought into from somebody at a higher level yet, then oftentimes you'll see people going and curating their own content, finding content to share. But what happens is it's not strategically aligned with the funnel stages, and it's not optimal for the buyers. So that usually might work, might get some interest going, but it's really about getting marketing involved, having them buy in and find the content for the sales team. And whether or not there's resources internally to go out and do research and write your content internally, which some of the larger, more sophisticated organizations do, it may be just finding a subset of blogs that identify with your message, with your strategic vision, and is viewed upon as valuable by the buyer. So I think it's a really good mix that you need to look at, and again, how sophisticated and how much is the level of buy-in to drive that.
Awesome. Before we move on to the tools part of this discussion, Jasmine, are there some potential pitfalls of social selling? So what?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As far as pitfalls of social selling, well, I had talked about, the importance of, in that process of social selling, about becoming this, I always call it, when I draw it out for my clients, I say I want you to be the hub, right? And I want you to have a million spokes of influence that are coming in and kind of pulling information from you, disseminating that information and building up this strong ecosystem. So a pitfall of social selling, I think first and foremost, is, I think Natascha mentioned it, which I see all the time, is everybody just says, oh, I need to do social media, right? And then they just start doing it. And then they don't continue doing it, or they're not adding value, or they're putting things out without social media guidelines, which for me as a strategist is like critical basic step one, right? So if there's no guideline, there's no buy-in from the top to the bottom, from the CEO to customer service, and there's no strategy, then the pitfalls are you could just start social channels, you could, put out information that's not supporting your brand. A lot of times it'll dilute the brand, the social brand. You'll start to build a relationship with customers and then drop off, and that can hurt you even more. Other things that if you're not tying in customer service to social selling in such a way, you have metrics around that, that can also hurt the brand because you're not responding in time. So those are just some literally simple things that I think are just some kind of tips to watch out for when you can get involved with social selling. And then kind of like the most obvious one is what we talked about in the beginning, which is being too much of a salesperson and just kind of self-serving, selling your stuff without listening. And we haven't even talked about this. I don't know if we're getting to this, but the key to social media is listening. So if you don't have monitoring in place from something like Julio's tool or the many tools that I use, or even like as simple as Google Analytics and Google Webmaster Tools and Google Alerts, if you're not listening and responding by listening, you're doing yourself a major disservice and you really don't understand social selling.
Absolutely.
Can I chip into that? Because Jasmine, I so agree. You hit the nail on the head. Like for me, the worst thing is we all know this tactic, right? Where you go in a LinkedIn group of people that you think are in your target audience, and you really try to be part of the discussions and answer questions and see where it leads. And those people who will be, yes, I have the solution, and then they copy kind of the boilerplate from the website. We are the leading company, and you're like, oh my god. I mean, that's so off-putting, right?
Absolutely. And this is a great time to get into the tool section. Before, a quick question for Julio from the audience. Does the content that Julio is mentioning need to be specific to the industry, or can it be more general in nature, related to areas that a business person may be interested in? Short and sweet, Julio, please.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be a number of different things. Obviously, as targeted as it can be, the better. But oftentimes that takes a lot of work. So that's when I suggest looking at things like, for example, Forbes technology section. Any executive in the tech sector is going to want to know about that. It's going to be impactful, and it's going to be riveting because that's the space they're in. So I think, yeah, trying to get as targeted as you can. But if you don't have the time and resources, absolutely, you can paint it with a bit more broader of a brush and take something that's might be cross-industry specific.
Awesome. All right, well, let's talk tools. So let's just use a tool and don't do anything else. I'm going to start with you. It's that's right. That's how it works, right?
Absolutely.
That's a great slide. Beautiful.
No, I love it. And that's exactly not how it works. Every tool out there requires training. I think we all agree. And one of the things we hit on the head when we first started chatting, the four of us, was an agreement on people, process, and platforms. I mean, there has to be the right process in place and strategy. There has to be the right tools, but there also has to be the right training involved. And what comes first? Who knows? I've seen things, happen in funny ways with a number of different accounts and deployments. I mean, sometimes, training comes first. Sometimes the tool comes first. Oftentimes, if you go into a company and you get issued an email and you just joined that company, you're probably going to get issued the email before you go through the policy training on day 1, day 2, day 3, or whatever that looks like. So hopefully social gets there where you get deployed, you have a tool the day you start, and the training complements it. So I would say, doing a simultaneous deployment of those, or making sure that, when a trainer comes in and puts in a deployment of, a great social selling training or B2B sales methodology training or whatever, when they leave and they don't recommend the right tools to put in place to operationalize that training and take the best practices across the board and make sure everybody's seeing them and doing them and putting them into play, then often that training also falls on deaf ears and doesn't have the biggest impact it can. So I'm going to say, yes, training, tools go hand in hand.
All right, cool. Actually, I'm going to ask Natascha, what's most important for social selling adoption? Training or technology, or a mix? Or what's your point on this topic?
So obviously, let me skirt around that a little bit. Obviously, as Julio said, their tool is really, really useful to help scale and facilitate social selling. But I read a really interesting statistic today from Nate Elliott at Forrester, who was saying, not for social selling, but for marketing, social marketing in general, that most people supposedly in marketing now have tools to help automate, but half of them don't actually use them. They just go to Twitter directly or Facebook and use those platform tools instead of going through the big tools. And that is a problem because a lot is lost. But I think personally education is most important, because the reality is, and I have clients that are global 2000 companies and say they have R-Factor, right? It's possible that they're not allowed to use the tool because corporate has it and they already have used their licenses. Might not be the case with R-Factor, but I'm just saying. And then they're like, oh, Natascha, can you help us and also do the metrics? But we don't have a lot of money for metrics. So then there's a lot of free tools, right? And I love tools like Bitly, which, isn't just a link shortener, but it tracks click-throughs and tells you where people click from and which links, or Buffer, where you can schedule, and Twittonomy and Twitter audit. There's tons of great tools that help make your life easier that don't have to be fancy. So if corporate isn't quite there yet, sometimes it's good to just start, and then if you can show success, maybe they will implement a bigger solution or let you become part of the tool. But unfortunately, big companies are so departmentalized. I am always shocked by how fragmented that can be. I mean, Julio, you probably see that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're in a stage where everybody's like, it's not quite hit the mainstream curve yet from an adoption side, and the buy-in is still skeptical, and people don't have a lot of money to throw around for, a whole bunch of tools that they haven't seen maybe prove themselves in the marketplace, for example, or just don't have the budget set aside yet. It might not be a need or something discussed at the strategic plannings meetings, and I really hope that changes quickly, because I noticed the same thing, Natascha.
And so we already heard, you guys mentioned a few tools. Why don't we, Jasmine, I'm going to ask you, what are your favorite 2, 3, 4 tools that you're using?
Very good question, because in the last, I have no idea, 6 months or so, I've been assessing a lot of tools, just because I write a lot, so I always want to be able to write about the latest tools, And so the thing is I think people need to understand, what they need to kind of evaluate their company before they just sign on to some tool. That's critical because, there's so many different tools now that support different levels of the organization, different sizes of organizations, right? So just for example, like if I have a small business client, let's say, when I say small business, I mean that's such an arbitrary, vague thing, I think, these days. But, a company, let's say, under 100 employees, right? They can get away with using things like Viral Heat or Hootsuite. I think those are a couple that come to top of mind that I have, deep experience, implementing and training my clients on. Whereas, because they don't have, a big marketing or sales organization, like I can think of accounting firms that have been my clients where, they have seriously 3 or 4 people in their marketing department, and they might have 400 employees, right? And they're stretched so thin that they don't have the time or the energy or the buy-in to use more sophisticated tools, right? Whereas if you look at larger companies, like airlines, for example, or, larger companies where the focus is more about customer service, which I'm going to always go back to when I talk about social media marketing, because I think that's like one of the biggest benefits of doing social media right, is to have great customer service. That's where you can look into bigger and broader tools, like, for example, I've done a lot of coverage around Salesforce's Social Studio, which used to be Radiant 6. Digimind is a tool I'm kind of getting into, Sysmosis. I mean, literally I could go on and on about enterprise level tools, and there's a whole bunch in the middle as well that I've personally been kind of assessing, and then newcomers to the game, right, like Social Bro and Amplify, and so many of these tools, right? So I think the first and foremost, I'm going to always agree with what Natascha said, because I firmly believe in that. The first thing is to have, an education and understanding of, not only social media, but who the company is and what tools they can commit to. Because, you could make Hootsuite your best friend if you're a small business, or you could buy some enterprise level social media tool and never use it. So I tend to really help my clients, and I think for anybody that's listening that's a marketer, understand what the scale is of these tools and align that to what your marketing goals are, before you kind of go crazy with social tools.
Well, I think also very important is that, I mean, you guys do a lot of training. You help people set up these tools and processes. And I see often companies fail with, they buy these expensive tools and they never get put to use. So this is why the value of, you guys going in and help train people. I mean, this is how success happens, right? All right.
And Jasmine brought up such a great point, if I may interject here, that it's not just about, I mean, this is something I think we have all talked about, that it's really dangerous to think in silos. And there's this big divide between companies that have been doing social media now for almost 10 years and they're getting pretty advanced, and companies who have not done anything and, they're totally new even to the social selling concept. But the future is, I mean, we're all reading it, predictive marketing, even trying to figure out from social media through listening tools, business intelligence, what are the intentions of our customers, You want to kind of scoop up this information from the internet and from connected with your email and your CRM system to see where things are going. So that is where I think if you don't have a social selling solution or marketing automation tools, then it's going to be really, really difficult for you to put all of that together, because it's already pretty difficult.
Right. Listen, I'd love to just tag on to this really quickly. So, before I started doing social selling training and social media marketing training, I did sales training, right? So to me, when I listen to marketing, teams or decision makers and sales decision makers, these questions that they have to me are almost exactly like the difference between the hundreds of CRMs for small businesses versus like a Salesforce, right? So it's like I come into that conversation all the time, and I always say, okay, so are you going to actually use this tool? What are your goals for selling? Are you tying this into other tools, right? And how can it support your organization? So I do think it's like you can get into this trap and danger that Natascha was talking about just like picking tools and then paying for them and trying to use them without that education in relation to your marketing strategy overall.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Why don't we dive into social selling, social branding? Julio, when does social marketing become social selling?
Well, I think there's completely two different goals behind it, right? I mean, social marketing is a lot more deployed from the marketing side of things, right? It takes that concept. Natascha spoke very eloquently earlier when she spoke about, finding the right metrics that make sense, right? Reach, engagement, amplification. I think when we start to move into sales and social selling, we have to be much more careful about the messages we're putting out there. They have to be more on a one-to-one, whereas I feel social marketing is at a one-to-many level, often involves, corporate messaging, etc. Where social selling really means getting unique about your messaging, connecting with buyers one-to-one, utilizing the channels a little bit differently, and also measuring a little bit differently as well. I think if you can find a tool that, or if you can do it manually, getting the information that you're taking from social and your interactions and making sure that they connect with your CRM system, and we're using social media in a way that supports the sales process, then I think that's when we start to get away from social marketing and into social selling. And I think that's, again, the value of having people like Natascha and Jasmine and yourself, Chris, in showing teams how this is different, because it's not a definition that's been completely defined yet, and we're still working on those best practices, and it's crucial that we, the small group of people that has those best practices, share those.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found this mind map of a social media plan. I love it. I mean, this is just a very small part, a screen capture of, it's probably a third, probably a quarter. I love this. I mean, this company has a plan. Let me throw out a question here. So what's the difference, crossover point and best practices between social branding and social selling? Natascha or Jasmine, who wants to take this question?
I'd love to take it, and I wanted to say we don't always have to all agree, right? Because I think...
Yeah, we think so.
That's right. I think, for me, I would be a liar if I said I totally know where this is going, because, as I said earlier, I think this is also new, that there's a lot of overlap and not everything has to be figured out, because digital transformation also means that organizations have to change, right? It's like having a chief digital officer in addition to the CMO, kind of that large scale. But for me, why all of this is merging together, and I think it's impossible to always separate social selling, social marketing, social customer service, is because of this new sales funnel, right? I mean, we all know we had this one that went from left to right, which never totally made sense, but we all know it. And now I saw one the other day from McKinsey, which is this loop. And my favorite part on this loop is that actually goes around again in there, which is called the loyalty loop. And I think we all know, right, that in social media, that's kind of the wonderful and the horrible part, where somebody has bought something, and in the good old days, the sales guy moved on to the next customer, and I'm being a little facetious here, but didn't care anymore. But now this client will start and tweet about it and say, "Oh, my customer service is really good," or "Oh, I just bought, now nobody cares about me," and hey, tells all his friends how wonderful it is. And so who's in charge of that, right? Jasmine made this great point that it's really important to not ignore people when they say something, when they have questions, when they complain. So if you don't monitor at that point, you can really lose, because if somebody's angry, that can totally escalate. And when somebody's happy, this comes back to the discussion, hey, where do I get my content, right? Maybe you can incent this happy customer to write up their story because they're so happy right now, and give them some fame, or ask them if they want to do a little video or write a blog post, and then, hey, you have the best content in the world. So for me, that's what's new, what we didn't have in the past, or in the past was super painful. I have worked with these customer reference teams. I mean, wasn't it horrible in the past? You had to go manually through these spreadsheets and be like, oh yeah, we could call this guy. Now you're like, oh, did you see this? This guy said they love us.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, that's awesome, Natascha. I mean, to jump in, I think that is something that's worth, bringing up again, is this sort of blend, right, of some of the front-facing employees, like your customer service team and your sales team and your marketing team and the HR recruiting team, and it's all sort of blending together to create CX, customer experience. And oftentimes it could be any one of those folks that are involved in the first touch point, the first impression that they're going to have with your company. And I think making sure that there's a way to collaborate amongst departments, like if somebody is angry about the product or can't get a hold of somebody on the sales team, then it's great if a customer service person can identify that and make sure that they are working in conjunction with the sales team and passing them over. And I think we're going to see in the future, as we go through this digital transformation period, where we'll see that merge into a customer experience team where there's potentially shared metrics involved, and that may be a ways away, but I definitely see it coming.
Social media, what an amazing way to get CEOs of big companies to directly talk with customers, right? And so few companies do it. Look at, I got a bunch of teenage kids here in my household. If they get a tweet back from one of their stars, they're so happy. And the same thing can apply to somebody who uses a product and they hear back from the CEO. What an missed opportunity for so many companies. Julio, I'm going to ask you, what does it take to get these departments to align their efforts? And if you could please share your Vegas experience where you tweeted about what happened to you at that hotel. And you don't have to. Yeah.
No problem. I'll gladly name the hotel. No, but from a how do you get started, I think it's really key that right from the get-go, right, let's say marketing and sales, we'll take them for example, they have to agree that this is a project that they're going to take on together. There might be varying responsibilities that lie on each side, but that's going to mean, taking arch rivals and throwing them in a room together and say, let's work this out. Don't come out of the room until you're done. And that's essentially what needs to happen is marketing and sales have to agree that this is a project that everybody's going to kick a goal and win on, and we have to take the right approach to this. So that's going to mean setting up regular meetings now between whether it's a project manager or whether it's leadership in marketing and sales to first iron out some agreed upon metrics, right? And I think to back it up, I always say, and this plays right into what Natascha was saying earlier about the metrics, is I say get real, right? Reach, engagement, amplification, and leads generated. If you can use the real methodology and roll that out, what's nice about it is it gives marketing a chance to see those metrics that they care about and they need from an amplification and reach standpoint, so that in certain cases they can cost justify against other models of spending such as CPC and paid and sponsored ads. But it's also very key for sales to see what revenue is coming out of it. So that leads piece is necessary. And again, that's exactly what our factor does, is we provide the connective tissue between the social networks and your CRM system. So that you can capture that and understand in a report in Salesforce or Dynamics or whichever CRM you may be using clearly how many leads were generated from social activities. When you can agree on some certain metrics to push forward on, it becomes much more of a team approach and less of pushing and pulling. And I think that's a great way to start to get marketing and sales to align.
Absolutely. And JC, I think this answered your question about social selling is digital transformation, therefore involves employees, CEOs, customers. What else? I would probably say influencers, if you can, those are oftentimes customers turn into influencers. Who else is involved in this digital transformation process? Natascha, can you think of anybody else?
Well, I would say everybody, and this is where, I agree and disagree with Julio, as he knows, but he said earlier something where I want to extend on that in the age of social media, everybody in the company, every employee is basically a salesperson, because if you are on Twitter or on social media talking about the company, it's social selling, and it's a huge opportunity. I was reading something about IBM. They created some social selling effort and encouraged employees, and supposedly they had like some crazy rate of great feedback and creating deals out of it. So it's really amazing what can be done. I don't think anybody who is, it's basically, if you're on social media, you work for the company, you are part of the brand, you are part of marketing, you're part of sales, because when you're the client, and this comes, sorry, back to the digital transformation, I don't care, right? If Jimmy in customer service told me something, or Peter, the sales guy, or the marketing person, I want them all to be coordinated. And for me, that's one company. And that's part of the challenge, right? So everybody is selling.
Yeah, I'd love to kind of touch in on this, Chris, if I can. One thing that I think is critically important that we actually really haven't talked about is the whole point of community building. And from a social branding perspective, I think that you need to assign roles to the right people within the organization that have the aptitude, the interest, and the passion around community building, so that they can either play the role of lead customer service or influencer or thought leader. So I could give you a million examples, but I would give you just an example because I tend to focus on B2B of an accounting firm client that I have where one of the things that we've done pretty well is focus on specific partners that have, that are subject matter experts in certain verticals, and it's really their job, driven by marketing and guidelines, to develop communities of interest within social media. And that's where they can become a thought leader. That's where they can build a community. And that's the point where I think branding can really support social selling. So that's something that I think that organizations really need to think about and assess their employees to say, who really will damage my brand, who can support my brand, who's the ringleader, and who's potential thought leader.
Exactly. So let's actually move on to the next section. I want to add on to something, Jasmine, you said. So how are we going to effectively execute and measure social selling? So I write occasionally for a website called Social Media Examiner. One piece that I did was called LinkedIn Employee Engagement Programs. It's sort of like a manual, process what R Factor could do. My main point there was that if you don't have a champion that's going to drive this process, it's simply not going to happen. I've implemented many of these programs at sizable companies, and I check back. I see, are they still doing it? And unfortunately, as soon as the champion, sort of like loses interest, nothing's going to happen, and they just wasted a ton of money. So, Julio, who owns social selling inside a organization?
Well, that's again, I think it's a unique question that's applied a little bit differently, right? I think I've worked with sales teams specifically where they said, okay, let's try this. We want to use our sales team only. I've had conversations and programs that have deployed with a bit larger, companies that have a bit more buy-in where it's coming from marketing and they want to activate not only the sales team but other members in their organization to share content out. So I think, again, it's unique. It depends on the structure and makeup of the organization. And again, it can start in sales, it can start in marketing, but ultimately as it grows, we are going to need to see an alignment of those two as well as other departments that are going to be involved. And I think Altimeter Group does a really good job when they talk about the center of excellence and making sure that there's somebody that's a champion for each of the departments involved and having a committee that works together on that. And again, some of the kind of more advanced companies, as Natascha and Jasmine both alluded to, have new roles for this. There's program managers for digital. There's digital sales teams now. There's people who have CDOs, chief digital officers, or chief transformation officers now. And a lot of them are driving some of these programs from the top. So I'm curious to see if you all agree.
Natascha, do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's not something, and Altimeter, I really love what they do, and if you have read their reports, and they're available for free on SlideShare, and I highly recommend them, they're wonderful. There's different models how you can, for example, organize your social media team, and currently I would say that a lot of social media responsibility rests with marketing. I'm not saying that has to be the case down the road, but that seems to be the case. And for me, it's really hard to keep control, and a big part to keep things in line, especially to protect the corporate brand, is to have, Jasmine mentioned earlier, to have good social media policies and a governance team. Like, I happen to know, and this has been for years now at Intel, that there are people who go and basically try to find accounts that people in the company open that shouldn't be there. And there's this social media proliferation, or the guidelines have to be very clear. I see this with clients I work with, that employees will maybe use the company name in their Twitter handle, and that sounds like a corporate account, right? So that's not okay. Or you can't use the logo of the company in your Twitter account if it's not a corporate account, because the client will assume, oh, it's a corporate account. So there have to be really clear rules to make it really crystal clear to the outside what is what, but also there have to be really clear rules for employees, what is okay and what isn't okay, because common sense really isn't so common. And I think we've all seen these cases, and unfortunately in the legal space, a lot of these social media cases have been settled and not decided. So there's still a lot of gray area, but there have been these lawsuits about who owns your LinkedIn account, who owns your Twitter followers, because they are seen as part of, right, the company value property of things that are used for sales and marketing. So it's really important that all of this is written down very well. If you're the employer, if you write in your social media policy, hey, if you tweet in your account about your job, then we own it, then you do. I'm not saying in Silicon Valley that's realistic, because nobody might work for you, but this is the kind of stuff you have to think about. Like, if I took a corporate job again, I can promise you that I would have in my contract that if I ever leave the company, my social media channels will be mine. So that's the tip of the iceberg, right? But it's a full-time job. I know when I was at SAP, they have a governance team. It's a full-time job to track down rogue accounts and close them down, because it can be really damaging to your brand. And Jasmine, I would love to hear your experience, because you work with a lot of executive level people.
Oh yeah, no, I love, honestly, Natascha, I love everything that you have to say. I actually can't wait till we meet. I think we're going to go on and on, but yeah, I mean, one thing that I wanted to touch on, which just kind of extend what you were saying a little bit in my personal experience, not just with executives, I'll get to that, but with employees. So if you think about onboarding employees, and in today, as an employer myself, right, I know that the problem with rapid turnaround, right, I think every employer does. So it is 100% depending on the size of the company, either the employer's job or the HR department's job to have rules and monitoring around new employees and about employees who leave. I find that you can either harness the power of your alumni, or they can be your worst enemy when it comes to social media. So just, for example, if an employee leaves and then they have on their, because I do a lot around LinkedIn, right? If they have on their LinkedIn profile, hey, you know what, I still work for Jasmine. Well, actually, no, you don't work for me. And all the things that you have in the profile are not accurate, but you as an employer can't take those things off. You have to go through this whole exercise of asking an ex-employee to take something off. So the more that you can be ahead of the game in terms of rules, guidelines, monitoring, management, and having somebody within the organization responsible for managing the employees and what they do in social media, definitely the better off you are. As far as executives go, the executives I tend to work with are people that I have to continually educate that the importance of social branding for them is authenticity. So you don't just want somebody managing your LinkedIn profile or your Twitter handle or your branded Facebook page or your blog. You really need to be involved with that, whether that's through a strategic content plan, through weekly meetings or daily kind of check-ins with whomever that person is, whether that's a ghostwriter or a social media manager. But that to me is like the key for the executives up front when they get involved with social branding as a individual social brand, is to determine and set some rules around their own authenticity. That's critical.
Awesome. Julio, from the tool side of things, how do you get started with big companies on social selling? How do you get people involved? Just give us, we're approaching top of the hour here. Give us the quick rundown here.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to, say I absolutely agree with Jasmine and Natascha on that. And it's kind of funny because I actually remember one of the first cases that went to court, and that was with Anderson Cooper when he was leaving the network to go start his show, and the previous network had actually tried to sue him and say all of those followers you had built up till now belong to us. And it was one of those first cases where he ended up winning because he had built the account before. He had started working there, and then from then on in, you started to see people get issued accounts. So their name would be, at Anderson Cooper CNN, or at reporter's name at this company, right? Whatever that is, ESPN. So now they're tagging it to make sure that there's no gray area, which is kind of interesting. And how do you get started on tools? I think it's dependent on your needs, where you're at from a maturity level. I think we can all agree that there's no one tool that fits all. I think if you're looking to deploy tools, not individually, but towards a team, or even at a larger scale, I think that you've got to choose something that connects with your existing systems, like your CRM, your marketing automation. You have to have a tool that has a great workflow in place. And I think that's exactly what we've tried to do at Art Factor, is look at all these tools that help B2B salespeople and wrap those all into one that's specifically built for B2B sales, that connects with your email, that connects with your CRM. So we're really trying to help people make that decision easier and get a tool set that essentially can work at the mid-market or at a larger scale.
Awesome. Before I have one more question for you guys, I'm going to quickly address a question from earlier on in the presentation. SEO is just one part of the social media landscape. My question is why the main priority for some marketers is just being on the top of Google. Well, I think you need to have a digital marketing strategy that includes social, content marketing, SEO, etc. If you do everything, you will see amazing results. It will take a little bit of time, resources, etc. But yeah, this is basically how it works. So you can't just silotize something. You got to do many things. Talking about that, how do you measure results? If each of you could just real quick give us an example, how have you measured results for one of your clients? We're going to start. Julio, I'm going to go with you first.
Sure, a great company. We just finished putting together a case study with Force Management out of Charlotte, North Carolina. When we put in our system, we were essentially tracking the amount of content that marketing put in, what was the end result in terms of how much got shared. So what was the reach, engagement, amplification on that? And then any activities that happened on social, whether it was a touch point that was first or whether it was a touch point with an existing prospect, we made sure to track that as activity history or create a new lead within Salesforce, which they were using as their CRM. So we're able to, over a 2-quarter period, start to actually see results and see revenue that was attached to social media activities. And we ended up showing a $1.3 million boost in revenue attributed to the social selling program we put in place in 2015.
Awesome, awesome. I'm going to go with Jasmine.
Okay, so there's a couple, but I think for the purpose of, Chris, just exactly what you touched upon, as a digital marketing strategist, I tend to look overall. So I want to give you an example of a client I worked with a couple of years ago where their problem, which is generally why I come in, is that they're spending time and money in digital marketing, and they either don't know what they're doing or they think they know what they're doing and they're not getting results, right? So I tend to look overall in terms of, the people, the tools, and the processes, as well as the content from an SEO, social media, online PR, social branding perspective. So this company is Interactive Edge. They provide presentation-ready software to very large CPG manufacturing companies so that they can go and sell their products into retail stores without going into a long story. So anyway, they are a software product, and they were just kind of doing things ad hoc. They would go to events and conferences and, just pick up business cards and email people. They had some social profiles. They had a website that really didn't build them out as a thought leader. They were paying somebody to do SEO, but they weren't really driving the right results because they didn't have a real market position. They didn't have a face behind the market position, and they didn't have content that was, I'm always going to go back to authenticity, and it's engaging content. So how I was involved with them is doing their entire digital marketing strategy and then helping their CEO to become a thought leader, to get involved in things like we're doing today, where he would be on webinars in the Category Management Association, attending conferences and actually speaking at those conferences with, his team exhibiting at those conferences, right? And while he's out there doing his thing and branding himself, all of that content was then being delivered online as well. So I helped them to develop a very seamless online brand and a machine that they could move forward with. So at the end of that project, they were able to bring on, instead of like some of the smaller manufacturing clients, they were able to bring on like Nestle and Purina as clients, because they were able to elevate their online brand visibility, which is what I always look for. And furthermore, I think more of an intangible result was that they, that they had a machine and that they had the people within the organization understanding how to use digital marketing moving forward.
Awesome. We are ready at the top of the hour. Natascha, how do you measure?
I'll make this brief, and as everybody has had these fantastic examples, I'm going to pick a really simple one. I've had this client who was a high-level executive in a company, and Jasmine also, I know she writes about this. You cannot see somebody's online presence in isolation. If somebody is a executive, almost like a celebrity, they have this offline presence, and if you do a good job, they take that with them. So this person was pretty reluctant about social media, but wanted to build their brand because this is asked for now. People talk about this, right? How many followers do you have and stuff? And he said, well, I don't really want to talk about what I have for lunch, and that's really boring. So I said, yeah, that's not what you will do. Bottom line, this person, we spend a lot of time. For me, it's a bit like a therapy. You try to figure out who does this person want to be long term, what are their goals, and you build their presence. And I feel like with that guy, and I can really take no credit for it, I created a monster. He got so many followers, and he started blogging on LinkedIn, and had his first blog. He had literally thousands of views and like 35 comments. I was absolutely couldn't believe it. Jasmine told me she's seen this before. I had never seen this before. So amazing, right? And I know it's because this guy is really smart and really connected, but he said to me that he couldn't believe how much he was loving this and how he was feeling really authentic. And I think that's the only thing I can take credit for, that you got to do your homework. If you don't feel it's you and you're really having integrity and saying what you believe, I think it's going to backfire on you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's about authenticity. We're not going to portray that we're somebody else. I think that's the core to social media strategy. Be real. We're all sick of these stupid messages and sales pitches. Just be yourself. That's my final word on this. Julio, one last word. We're going to wrap it up here. One final advice.
Yeah, my final piece of advice is just social selling's no different than going into a cocktail party. You go in, you listen, you be authentic, and you have a conversation that matters. You inject yourself when the time is right, and you use the right channel. And I think if you do that and just think of it as a real life situation that you would do any other time, you're going to be just great.
Awesome. Ladies, any last word of advice here?
I would say one thing that I would definitely say is to take it slow. I think that's what I always tell CEOs and executives and marketing teams when they want to jump into things in digital marketing, right? So kind of take it slow, and I agree with, all of you, and definitely what Julio was saying in terms of listening, because you can't really even jump into anything until you understand what that playground looks like Natascha was talking about, which is a perfect example. A LinkedIn group. I mean, what is it all about? Why do you want to be there? Who are you in that group, right? Are you a contributor, a participant? Maybe you want to start your own group, right? So I think that's really important. And then at the end of the day, it will help you to enjoy the process of social selling even more.
Awesome. Natascha, any last words?
Yeah, very quickly, kind of mirroring what Jasmine said. Don't bite off more than you can chew. You don't need to be on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and blog if you don't have the time. Really think about A, what you enjoy, and B, how much time you have. And my favorite example here is John Chambers, who used to be the CEO of Cisco. his team always wanted him to blog, and supposedly he's dyslexic and he hated that idea. So finally they figured out he's a sales guy, he loves to talk. We have a video studio. So he made this video blog with sound bites. So figure out what works for you and, keep it simple. And as you guys said, build on that and things will go from there. And, experiment, learn.
Awesome. Awesome. Hey, you guys have been amazing. I really, really appreciate it. Let's do it again sometime down the road. We'll all meet again sometime soon in person. Thank you so much. I'll make the recording available to all registrants and I'll send out the follow email and let's do this soon again. Hey guys, thanks so much. And thanks so much.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks so much for your interest. All right. Bye everybody.
Bye everybody.
Bye.